Hello, chefs. This is Chef's PSA Podcast. I'm your host, André Natera. On today's episode, we are going to talk about effective leadership in the kitchen. Stay tuned. Before we get started, just a brief update. The next episode, I'm going to have my former chef de cuisine, Jacob Chishchin, on the show. You can't pronounce his last name. We call him Triple Z, or I just apparently found out they call him HJ, but that's a story for another time. He'll be the next guest. I really enjoyed the episode. It also gives you some insight into what it was like to work with me. We talk a lot of different things, so look out for that episode next week. But for those of you that may be unaware, if you subscribe to my Substack, you get early access to the podcasts. I think I'm about 2 weeks ahead on Substack. Plus, you get exclusive podcasts that are only available there, all the free ebooks, some audiobooks, exclusive leadership classes, 15% off everything at the Chef's PSA store. For $10 a month, you get Chef Brains. It's a good deal. So if you want more Chef's PSA content, subscribe to the Substack. I'll put the link in the show notes. Also, my new book, Bad Cooks Everywhere. People love it. Go get it. If you want to support what I'm doing and you like the other books that I've written, you'll really enjoy this one. It's fiction. It's the story of a cook. It's a fun read. Go get it. Bad Cooks Everywhere. All my books are available on Amazon. I'm unsure, but I kind of want to write another book. I've been thinking about one of my favorite podcast series that I did with Chef's PSA is the 48 Laws of Power. It's a 4-part series. And I honestly think, like, if you listen to any of my podcasts, that's my best work. At least maybe I need to go back and listen to it. I think it's my best work. And I was thinking about taking the 48 Laws of Power as it applies to chefs and writing another book based on that. I don't know if I will. I might. If I do write another book, it'll either be that or like a spin-off of Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, but as applied to chefs. I think that would be fun also. Anyway, what were we talking about? We digress. Leadership. In the culinary world, the word chef means chief. Basically, it implies that you're a leader. All the different stations require leadership, from the executive chef to the chef de cuisine, to the demi-chef, to the chef de partie, to the commis chef, to the chef concierge. Leadership is implied through the title. Effective leadership is really what's going to separate good chefs from everyone else. The ability to think abstractly as a leader is what really separates great chefs, the ones that think differently and operate differently and take pride in leadership. There's an old expression, a chef can cook, but a cook can't chef. There are managerial aspects to leadership that are usually task-based, like checklists, making sure that you filled out your temperature logs, the schedule's written. That's managerial. Leadership is usually what doesn't involve a clipboard, a spreadsheet, or some work on the computer. Leadership is inspiring. Leadership makes people want to work for you. Leadership makes people want to follow you. Leadership makes people feel good when they're in your kitchen. It's an unconquering force. And what's really interesting about the concept of leadership, specifically in the kitchen, is some of the best chef leaders aren't necessarily the best cooks, but some of the best chefs that are cooks aren't necessarily the best leaders. It's the dichotomy of being a chef. It's an interesting paradox. When I was a young chef, I went through my first 3 executive chef positions, not really knowing who I am and really understanding my leadership style. The first one, I was green and I wanted to do all the work myself, so I wouldn't delegate anything. But it was a smaller operation, so I could get away with that. The second one was a much larger operation, and I still wanted to do everything, and it didn't work out. I was punching above my weight. I wasn't very successful in that job. Even though the food was good, the culture wasn't. The third chef job I had was this amalgamation of good leadership and good food. And then finally, I started to figure it out. And then my ego got the best of me, and I wasn't a very good leader. I was this polarizing character who thought to get results, I had to behave like an angry chef. I was too tied up in the result emotionally, which would lead to frustration. The next few jobs after that, I struggled because I had success. My food was on point, but my ego was getting the better of me. I didn't fully understand the responsibility of a leader. It took some failure for me to understand and to reflect. There was a moment in my career where I sat there and I analyzed the ups and downs in my career. There were moments when I was very successful and there was moments when I wasn't. And I would look back on the places where I was really successful and say, what was different between this place and that place? And it was never the food. It was the workplace culture. That's when the light bulb went off for me and I realized that leadership and kitchen culture was really the driving force of the success of the restaurant or the place where I was working. It wasn't necessarily the food. Because there were places where you could argue that the food was better, but we failed. And there was places you could argue that we succeeded and the food wasn't as good. It took me down this road which led me to Chef's PSA. And it was about 4 or 5 years or longer of thinking about this. Is how do you create an environment where people can succeed? And I thought about all the mistakes I had made as a leader and wanted to correct them. But I got better as a chef. I learned to control my emotions. I learned how to lead people. I learned how to work with different styles. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I was constantly refining my style of leadership. So what makes a great leader? First and foremost, communication. The ability to communicate what's expected of service. The ability to communicate what's expected of the cooks in the kitchen. How many covers do we have? Where are we going? How do you make a recipe? How do I make sure you know how to make the recipe? No surprises. We know what's coming up today. We know what's coming up tomorrow. We know what's coming up next week. Everyone's informed. There's transparency in the communication. If someone has a question, they're not afraid to ask. A lot of times people are afraid to ask the question because they feel like they're going to get in trouble. Communication is a two-way street, up and down the hierarchy. Cooks need to be able to communicate with chefs. Chefs need to be able to communicate with cooks. The better the communication, the better the kitchen. So it's not just about having communication, it's about being an effective communicator. If you're communicating via email, making them short, not so long that people don't want to read it, making them brief, bullet point, highlight what's important, say more with less. If you're communicating in meetings, pertinent information. Meetings aren't too long where you're wasting people's times and they've tuned out and they're not listening anymore. You're not bringing people to meetings discussing things that could be done over text. Right? A lot of meetings are time wasters. Good communication is being respectful of people's time. Good communication is distilling the information as it comes to you and getting to the point very quickly. Good communication is making sure that everyone knows what's expected of them. New hires and veterans. They have recipes, menu syllabus, photographs, station diagrams. That's all part of communication. Being organized is good communication. Next is vision and inspiration. A leader knows where they're going. They know where they're taking their team. We're going that way. And I promise you, if we keep going that way, we will succeed. There's inspiration. Everyone knows their role on the team and they play a part. There's no arbitrary roles. Everyone knows that what they are doing funnels to the overall goal where we all succeed. They have a sense of belonging and they feel like they're a part of it. If they don't feel like they belong, they will go somewhere else where they do belong. A sense of belonging is a very strong thing. A good leader knows how to create a dragon that everyone's going to go slay. So sometimes I like to say I would create false dragons, whatever that may be, a new award. We're chasing that. Our competition, a big event, that's the dragon. You create a little bit of fear, not fear in a bad way, but fear in a sense that they don't want to fail. Fear in the sense that they want to succeed. A challenge. Maybe a challenge is a better word. They don't want to lose. You get addicted to winning. The more you win, the more you win. A good chef leader is adaptable. They could read the data that's coming in and know when to pivot. When do they need to change the menu? When do they need to reorganize the line? When do they need to stop the books or the door? Because after a certain point, it's no longer going to be a good service. People come and go in restaurants all the time. Are you able to reorganize quickly and shuffle based on the players that you have currently in your kitchen? What if one leaves? What do? Does the whole thing fall apart? A good leader has a plan and has a contingency plan for everything, is very adaptable. Sometimes there's no good moves on the chessboard. You just got to make the best move. A good leader builds a team, doesn't break them down. A good leader encourages their growth, is talking about their future, sees something in them that they might not yet see in themselves. A good leader is able to push you and extract that greatness from you. There's a lot of great people out there, and sometimes they just need to be poked a little bit to pull that greatness out. A good leader should be able to recognize that in someone. They sit down and they communicate with their team and they figure out what makes them tick. A good leader understands that the success of the whole is greater than the success of a few or an individual. It's not my win, it's our win. We win together, we fail together. It's not I win, you fail. When someone on the team wins, everyone wins, and we celebrate the success. When I was a chef, we were so addicted to winning, we'd celebrate anything. Anyone's win. Someone won a local competition. Someone got a promotion. Someone got a new job. Someone had a baby. Celebrate. You want to make sure that you have a culture of celebrating wins, because the more wins you celebrate, the more wins you'll find, because you're constantly looking for a way to win. You could also fall into the trap of complaining about losses. If you're always complaining about losing, you will find more losses so you can complain about them. So do the opposite. You got to rewire your brain and reframe how you look at things. A good leader delegates, spreads the work appropriately. Now, in kitchens, sometimes one person has more work than the other, but it's usually because they're more competent than another cook, right? A green cook in their first few weeks of cooking isn't going to be as efficient as someone that's been doing it for 10 years. So you can't give them the same workload. They're not going to be able to get it done the same. A good leader understands that. But a good leader also doesn't give someone less work and make it easy for them. A good leader challenges them and makes it harder and increases the difficulty setting with every task. The brunoise has to get a little bit better. The sear has to get a little bit darker. The tomatoes got to be diced a little bit faster. You're always increasing the difficulty setting for the cooks. So they are also seeing themselves improve. When you've been doing it for a while, you know you got to do these things. But sometimes the new cooks don't know this. They don't know that they got to constantly challenge themselves. So you got to time them for everything. You got to say, hey, you got 30 minutes to do this job. And when they get it done, you got to say, good job on getting it done in time. Here's how you can do it better tomorrow, right? You're going to do 29 minutes, or you're still going to do it in 30 minutes, but it needs to be a little bit more precise. A good leader is also giving feedback, positive and constructive. You're reframing your words to make sure that they're learning. A good leader is able to tell a story so it sticks and explain why something needs to be done a certain way. You can't just say, do it because I said, because that won't stick. But if you say, do it like this, and here's why you do it like this, it's more likely for them to understand. That's why stories are so helpful in the kitchen. Understanding the backstory. Hey, this is why you cut your tape straight. This is why it needs to be short. Because if you use a piece of tape that's 1 inch versus a piece of tape that's 8 inches long, it's 8 times the cost of the tape. And imagine if you do that with everything, right? If they understand that being wasteful affects what they do, they might be more likely to do the right thing. If they understand that if you fold your towels, you get an exponential amount of uses out of it and it's cleaner, then they might be more likely to fold their towels. If you explain to them that you don't put wet ingredients behind dry ingredients on your stationing, so when you're grabbing the ingredient, it doesn't drip over the dry ones and get your mise en place all wet, well, then that might click. But sometimes we just don't notice these things because we're new. And sometimes we do things and we don't know why we do them. We just know intuitively, but we forget that we learned it at one point. A good leader can communicate those ideas and is an effective teacher. A good leader handles conflict quickly, recognizes when something's getting out of hand and the tension is rising and de-escalates things. Pulls someone into the office and says, what's going on? Has the tough conversations that need to be had and has them quickly. Sits people down and helps them make peace. Recognizes when someone isn't a good fit in your kitchen and gets them out of there. Recognizes when one of your cooks is being bullied but can't speak up for themselves and says something. That's what you get paid to do. You get paid to do the things that other people don't want to do. It's what comes with the territory of leadership. It's not all fun and games. A good leader cultivates a positive work environment. Makes sure that people enjoy coming to work. Makes sure that they enjoy cooking the food. They enjoy being a part of the team. A good leader helps people grow in position, mentors them, coaches them. And a good leader knows when to let people go to find better opportunities. And I don't necessarily mean that like you're firing them. I also mean that sometimes you recognize someone like, hey, this is not the right kitchen for you. You would be much better suited in this kitchen, and I'm going to help you get in there. I was never the type of chef that would hold anyone back. If I thought it was a good move for you, I will tell you it's a good move for you. Go to that kitchen. If I thought it was a bad move for you, I will also tell you the same thing like, hey, you have a blind spot. You're not ready for that yet. You need to stay in this position a little bit longer. People sometimes are very impatient to get to the next role, and they need a good leader to explain to them why they're not ready. But not just tell them why they're not ready, but explain to them and show them why they're not ready. It's about trust building. If you have a mentor, they're worth their weight in gold. You want to make sure you hold on to them, especially an honest mentor. Not someone that's just telling you what you want to hear, but someone that's pushing back sometimes and not always agreeing with you. There's a quote from the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, that says, when the leader's work is finished, everyone around them will say, amazing, we did it ourselves. And that to me is the sign of a good leader. Is when people learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. They're able to feel good about what they've accomplished and they didn't even notice your leadership was almost invisible. That's when your leadership is really good because everyone is getting better. The food is coming out beautifully. The success just keeps pouring in. No one recognized that you were the driving force behind it because you did it so seamlessly. That's good leadership. Great leaders create great leaders. One of the proudest moments I've ever had is when I opened up and I had 8 chefs around me. And of those 8 chefs, my 8 sous chefs and chef de cuisines, all of them are now very successful executive chefs. I could not be more proud of them. And I'm hoping that my legacy is I'm helping cooks become chefs and chefs become better chefs. I'm helping you find your greatness. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of leader are you? What's your legacy going to be? Anyway, if you want to support the show, you know what to do. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts, make sure you leave 5 stars. Nothing less than 5 stars. If you want to get the books, they're all available on Amazon. You can go to chefspsa.com and you can get all the books there as well, including the merch, this hat right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's camo. Look out for next week's interview. I think you'll really enjoy it. We'll see you next week. Hit the porno music.
Yo, it's André in the kitchen, mixing, dropping chef knowledge, no fiction, stirring up the beats, heating up the session. Listen close, class is in session.